Good morning. I am working on replacing my fairy light. I managed to forget to cover this thing when it rained one time, and 2 of these have gone out. I tried just replacing the batteries and it didn't do any good, so I know that they are just bad. And I went and dug through my little basket in my closet where I keep like my batteries and bulbs and stuff like that, and I had an entire packet of fairy lights in there at one point, but I did get it out and took out one thing of fairy lights, which I intended to put in the kitchen, and now I cannot find the pack of fairy lights. And I have absolutely no clue where I would have put them, because that basket in the closet is where I put all of that kind of stuff. So the only one I have right now is the one I pulled out for the kitchen. So I'm gonna put this in and continue probably looking throughout the day in different places I think of where I might have left the silly things. But I had a whole packet of like 6 or 10 or something like that of these, and I know I still have a few left, so I'm gonna see if I can find them. But I need to replace these little fairy lights because it's now getting to the season where I can actually use them, because, you know, height of the summer, or right at summer solstice, it was daylight at 5 a.m. and then it didn't get dark until 9, and I was not out here early enough or late enough to need them. So now I'm going to get to start using them, so I really need to get them replaced. But if I can't find them, at least they are very, very inexpensive to order another packet of them. But it is actually cold out here this morning, in case you hadn't noticed from the fact that I'm wearing fuzzy socks and a sweater and insulated leggings, or like the fleece lined leggings. And I'm loving it. Today's high is only going to be 79 degrees. So it is going to get back up to being hot again by, I think, Monday through Wednesday of next week. It's going to be in the like mid to upper 90s again. But there won't be any high heat index. So it's actually going to feel like the mid to upper 90s and not like 115. So, I mean, I guess that's a plus. But just a few days of that, and then it drops back down into the 80s. So today and yesterday, definitely very fall, autumnal weather. That is not the norm, and it is not going to stay, but at least we are getting a break finally from the heat. My garden is going to start doing better now, because really none of the plants that I have out love heat over 90 degrees, especially the tomatoes and the pumpkins and all of the squash plants. They start to shrivel up and die, like the actual fruit starts to shrivel up and die as it's coming on. So I would have had a ton more watermelons and pumpkins if not for the fact that it was so hot from mid-July through mid-August, because the majority of the fruits that formed just shriveled up and died before they even had a chance for the flowers to open and pollinate, just because it was too hot for them. So I don't know. I think I'm going to remedy that next year by starting them early indoors, and that way they have a good head start before we get super high heat. We'll see if that makes a difference, but I didn't intend to just start rambling and rambling and rambling. I wanted to mostly fill you in because you would have noticed that this vlog started out Monday and now it is Wednesday. So what I have decided to do was take Tuesday off this week instead of Thursday, because Thursday is one of my favorite events of the year that happens twice a year. They do it in the spring and the fall. It is the library's fall book sale. And I'm a Friends of the Library member, which means I get early access. So I get to go on Thursday evening from 6 to 8 is the sale for Friends of the Library members. So fingers crossed that they'll have a good selection this time. The spring book sale was it wasn't the greatest. I actually came away with, I don't know, it was less than 10 books, and that is very, very unusual for me. Normally I come home with like 3 big stacks of them. So I'm really hoping that I will find lots of books again this year. But I will say I'm building a classics library, and it is in my basement, and my son's room is also down there. So he kind of shares space and takes over and invades everything. So I made him clean up that area and get out of my library area so that I can take you down there and film and show you all of that when I get back from the book sale with all of the new books. But I am building a classics library, and as things progress with that, I'm finding fewer and fewer books at these book sales that I don't already have, and that is potentially part of the issue as well. So we will see what I come home with, but that is what I'm excited for this week. And now I'm going to get back to working on taking these down. I'm going to stuff the one new one in, and then I guess it'll go on hold until I find the others. But also, since it is so nice, I brought my laptop out here and worked from it most of the day yesterday, and I'm probably going to do the same thing today. Hi, I want to quickly do my meal plan for this week with you guys before I have to clock back into work and then hop into a meeting. So for next week, I decided I'm going to do the spicy Thai basil tofu. So I did try doing not really a recipe so much as just like a stir fry that I use tofu in this week, which is what I made for dinner. So I've been eating my curry soup for lunch and that for dinner. Because there was something I made recently, I believe it was the tofu kebabs, where I air fried the tofu, and I actually like the texture of it. Now, it had to be like the super firm tofu, so the most firm that you can get. But I did that this week, so I tossed it in cornstarch and I air fried it for, I think, 8 minutes in total, and then added it to the stir fry, and it actually was pretty good. So I'm learning how I like tofu, because I really don't care for the texture, but I've learned if it's super firm and it's air fried after being tossed in cornstarch, I do like it. So I'm going to try that again next week in a spicy Thai basil recipe, because one of the restaurants here in town, one of my favorite things that they have on the menu is, I think they call it sweet basil Thai. So it's similar to that. So I really wanted to try this recipe. Now, my Thai basil plant is not very old, because it was one of the later ones that I finally found at a local nursery and bought. So I won't be able to use it for the full, like I think it's a half cup of basil leaves, but I do have a ton of sweet basil, so I'll supplement with some of that. But as always, I will link the recipe below, and then my blog post will be linked below so that you can go there and find the printable or downloadable PDF version if you wish. Shopping list is there, and you should have everything you need if you want to make it along with me next week. So now I am going to read a little bit more of my book until I have to clock back in and hop into a meeting. And I think that's probably going to wrap it up for this day as well. So the next time I see you will be tomorrow, book sale day. So see you then.
Good morning, Miss Emmys. Come here. That's a good girl. Hi, sweet thing.
All right, I figured it was about time that I get my stack of books put away before I drag home more. So I have them all on the shelf now. And I made my son kind of clear his crap out of this space so I could actually show you my in-home little classics library. It's not all classics, it is most classics, but there are certain other authors too that I really like that may not be considered classic, at least not yet, that I will buy. And so I have some of those on here as well. I think I said in a previous vlog that I have all of my female authors on my shelf upstairs in my living room, and then this is all male authors. So I'll have to run up there and kind of give you a little tour of that bookshelf too. I will grab my cell phone to just kind of show you what's on the shelves because I can't carry this camera with me without a gimbal because you would never be able to see what you're looking at because it would just be all jumbly. So I will turn this off, grab my cell phone, and give you a little tour. All right, we will start with shelf number 1. And so I did this alphabetically by author's first name, which probably seems a little strange, but occasionally you'll run across that one where maybe we don't have a last name or something. So that's just the way I decided to do it. We've got lots of Charles Dickens on there. See, this is what I meant. Obviously not a classic, but I really like Colin Powell. So I had a couple of his books from years and years ago, so I stuck them on the shelf. And then we, of course, have the famous F. Scott Fitzgerald. Frank McCourt, I really love. Angela's Ashes is one of my favorite books, so it's upstairs on my dresser in my bedroom, which is what I kind of have reserved for my most favorite books. And then down here, in between some of Granny's old little knickknacks, got some Henry James. And then Herman Melville. And down here, you would have seen me put away another John Steinbeck novel. We've got some James Joyce, the classic Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit, The Catcher in the Rye, which is like every man's favorite book. And then Franny and Zoe, I have not read yet. That is definitely one I want to get to, but I just keep getting so many holds from the library. Okay. Oh, and here's a perfect example of what I was talking about with only one name, Homer. So these are definitely newer books that are not classics yet, but they definitely will be as time passes. And that is Khaled Hosseini. So The Kite Runner is the one, it's on the banned book list, and actually does get taught in some high school English classes and stuff. And so it's his most famous one, but I actually really, really loved A Thousand Splendid Suns better because it is about women. Whereas this one, the protagonist is a man, which doesn't make a darn bit of difference, except that as a woman, I like reading about a woman's experience. And so this is the experience of women in Afghanistan whenever it was taken over by terrorist organization. And then, of course, Kurt Vonnegut, Leo Tolstoy, we've got Norman Mailer. Let's see. These are O. Henry. And then, oh, almost missed some of these. So this is poetry in this little stack, and then this is some language books, and then this is just kind of some random stuff that I believe were actually given to my children that I hung on to. And then Pat Conroy, another one that's not like a classic, but to me he will be, especially The Prince of Tides, because it's been made into a movie, so you may have heard of that one. I really need to face some of these because they are so small and they get tucked back in there. But Somerset Maugham. And then, of course, Stephen King. I have a few of his. And then we have Truman Capote down here, the famous Breakfast at Tiffany's. And then, of course, Victor Hugo, Les Miserables, and The Hunchback of Notre Dame. And then we have William Faulkner, who is a very, very strange man. I don't know how much you've read of William Faulkner, but he does not have a writing style. It was like he just tried a little bit of everything because every single one of his books is so different. So I think my very first one that I read of his was Light in August, and it's a good thing that that was my first, because if I had started with The Sound and the Fury, which is arguably his most famous, I don't think I ever would have gotten through it, and I probably never would have picked him up again, because The Sound and the Fury is stream of consciousness, and it is very confusing, and you never have a clue what in the world is going on or whose perspective you're in. So I definitely didn't enjoy that book, but I do have a few of his as well. This is the one that the docuseries that I was talking about. I think I had mentioned it earlier in this vlog, definitely in the last one, but it's on Netflix now, and I can't remember the name of it, so I will look it up and I'll put it on the screen here. But it is largely based off of this book, and they actually mention the author William Shire a lot in that docuseries. This is a very, very, very thick, big, honkin' long book. I think I've mentioned before the audiobook version of it is 57 hours long, but it is very, very, very informative. It is a complete history of how Hitler, like the very beginning of his rise to power, beginning right after the end of World War I, all the way up through the end of World War II. So it covers a lot of history. Very valuable information to have. And then, as promised, coming upstairs to show you this one. So this, I've actually not read it. I plan on reading it probably this fall. It's not like a horror, but you know, there is a little bit of a note of that in it. I've seen the movie and I love the movie, and the books are always better, so I'm definitely going to have to read that. And then we have some Edith Wharton, Emily Bronte, which my very, very favorite book is by Charlotte Bronte. It's Jane Eyre, and that one is also in my room on my dresser, which I'll also have to show you, I guess, when I'm done with that. What is this? It's so faded. Emily Dickinson, which I believe I have a book about her in the basement that I have in my poetry, but I want to keep my women up here. So some Flannery O'Connor, George Eliot, which, a funny little story about George Eliot. We have a feral cat that we feed at Michael's house, and before we were able to, like, he was still pretty young, and we definitely couldn't handle him, so we didn't know if he was a he or a she. We have since found that it is a he because it's been glaringly obvious since he's been full grown. But when we didn't know, we were trying to come up with a name that would be gender neutral, and I suggested George because of George Eliot, which was not her real name, but that is the pen name that she used because, being a woman author and not wanting to be lumped into like the romance category during the time that she was writing, she decided to just use a male pen name so that she could, first of all, be picked up and read, and also be discussed in literary circles. The classic To Kill a Mockingbird, of course. And then this is what I was talking about with certain authors that maybe aren't technically classics. However, I really, really love the books, and you probably know by now that I am very big into the historical fiction genre, and I like Heather Morris's 3-book series, which I have 2 of, so I still need to get the other one. Jane Austen, honestly, not a big fan. I only have 2 of hers, and the reason that I'm not a big fan is because her time period was a little bit before. Like, you know, I like the 19th century authors, but hers was in the 18th century, I believe. I will correct myself here if that is not right, but just the way that they spoke and the way that they wrote during that time period was very, very wordy, and I find it painful to get through her books. So I'm just not really a fan, as much as that may sound like blasphemy for someone who is doing a classics collection. But then Jean Rhys, I do have her complete set, and then also Wide Sargasso Sea, which is in this one. But Wide Sargasso Sea is considered to be kind of a prequel to Jane Eyre. It was in one of my college journalism classes that we had to read that, and I fell in love with it, so I definitely had to get it. Move some plants out of the way here. Jodi Picoult, another author that I love, and I will buy everything I see by her. Kristen Hanna is another one of those, as is Kate Quinn. So far, I think this is the only one I own of Kristen Hanna's, but we will see what I come across at the book sale tonight. And then, of course, Anne of Green Gables. I only have 2 from this series, but I would definitely buy them all if I found them. And then Little House on the Prairie series by Laura Ingalls Wilder. You can't not have that. And then, so these 2 don't really count. They are books that were my grandma's that she always had on this bookshelf when I was a kid, and they got passed down to me, so I have them kind of just tucked in here. Same with this. These 2 go on my little ottoman during the fall and winter months. Right now I have lighter colored books on there, so they're just stacked here until then. And then this also, obviously not female authors, but just a place to stick them. But so we have, you know, the infamous Little Women. This is one, Michael met a lady downtown and helped her to her car. She was an older lady, and she had told him that she had written a book, and he knew how much I love books, and they got to chatting, and she gave him a copy to give me. I have not read it yet, but I stuck it in my bookshelf.
Of course, Margaret Atwood, Mitchell, Mary Shelley, Frankenstein is a pretty good book. Not as good as Dracula. If you're wanting to look for something to read for the spooky season coming up, I strongly recommend Dracula. It is one of my favorites. Maya Angelou, who is my favorite author of all time. Well, of course, my favorite book is Jane Eyre, but Maya Angelou's I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings is my number 2, and I've loved everything that I have read by her. I adore Maya Angelou. And then Sylvia Plath, we've got her unabridged journals, which I've not read all of. I've read about half of this probably. The Bell Jar, which is a very depressing read. It is a very good read, but it is kind of painful, and I definitely had to take breaks getting through it. And then this one is just one that there was like an Instagram giveaway where they mailed out free copies, and I have been, so before I started doing video vlogging, I did a lot of writing, and I was kind of studying a history of oppression in America. And it's not only Black Americans, but also, Hispanic Americans, Asian Americans, Native Americans, women, anyone who's ever faced oppression in America. And I wanted to write a series of essays on my learning. So anytime I got the opportunity to read a book that would give me some insight and some perspective, I did. And that is why I chose that book that when I saw that giveaway pop up. So I have that one as well. And that is my collection in here. And last but not least, I have my favorite books in here. So of course we have Jane Eyre, The Awakening by Kate Chopin. So the Journey Songs book is not a book. It is a book of hymns so before I moved to the town that I live in now, I was living in my hometown, and I was in the church choir there. And so I brought that one home with me as kind of a memento from my time in the choir. Another Pat Conroy, this is his book South of Broad. And then of course I mentioned while I was downstairs, Angela's Ashes by Frank McCourt. Jodi Picoult, the very first, and the reason this one's in here, it's probably not my favorite historical fiction at this point. I've read so many that are good and even better than this one, but it was my first. It was my introduction to the genre. It was the first one to kind of make an impact on me. And it also covers my favorite time period, which was World War II. And in particular, both the resistance and then, the concentration camps, the Holocaust. But anyway, that is why that one is in here. And then this one, I'll get to in a second. So of course, I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings, as I mentioned, Maya Angelou, and then The Color Purple by Alice Walker. This one has been a recent addition, and it is A Room of One's Own by Virginia Woolf. If you are a woman, I definitely recommend giving that one a read. And now I will go over this one. So this is one that I adored when I was a kid, and my grandma gave it to me. And my grandma passed away just over a year ago in July of 2023. So you may have heard me mention her on here before, I am sure, if you've been around for a little while. But that is why I have this one in here. And that's it. That's my book tour. So I'm going to take you along with me this evening here, actually just in a little bit. And we are going to go to the book sale. I will not be able to do much filming there. I don't like to film other people without their permission as much as I possibly can. And there's going to be a ton of people at the book sale. So I want to make sure not to get those people in there. I will try to take a little bit of, some clips here and there of some of the books. But for the most part, I will just show you what I pick up whenever I get back home. Hi, I am back and I have all of the goodies. So I will share with you what I picked up. So first and foremost, not books, but 5 of the 6 seasons of Downton Abbey. I have everything except for season 5, so I'll just have to find that. But they're $2 a piece, so I thought that was pretty good. And now for the books. Pull out a stack. So I found Vindication of the Rights of Women by Mary Wollstonecraft. I'm not exactly sure how you pronounce that one, but I've had this on my list for a while, so I was glad to find it. And then I know I just got through saying that I'm not a fan of Jane Austen. However, if you're going to have a classics library, you kind of have to have Jane Austen. So I picked up Persuasion, and I also have Pride and Prejudice. It's down in here somewhere.
And then Ernest Hemingway, A Farewell to Arms. Sinclair Lewis, Main Street. This is the first Sinclair Lewis book, and I can't think of the name of the book that I would like to have. I'll put it up on the screen here, but it was just in the book that I finished and returned to the library. So I want to pick that one up when I get the chance. And then Heart of Darkness by Joseph Conrad. I could have sworn I had this already, but it was not on my list. I have like a little spreadsheet that I take with me that has everything documented from my home library, so I don't end up with duplicates. And then there's Pride and Prejudice. And then, in the spirit of the upcoming spooky season, the complete ghost stories of Charles Dickens. And then Lord of the Flies, which is probably the most recognizable of the books that I purchased. And then another Charles Dickens. Now, this is one that I'm not even familiar with. It is definitely a lesser known book of his, but it's called Little Dorrit. And then also another Charles Dickens called Dombey and Son, which is also one I have never heard of, but adding it to, gosh, I have quite a few Charles Dickens now at this point. And then Stephen King's Misery, and also Stephen King, The Green Mile. And then one non-classic, I found Firefly Lane by Kristen Hanna, which I know is pretty popular because it did come out on Netflix, but so far I only have one Kristen Hanna book, and it is The Nightingale, which is potentially my favorite of hers. I also really, really love The Great Alone and Four Winds. So between those three, I don't know which one I would pick as my favorite, but there was no other Kristen Hanna there that I found besides that one. And then three more. So I found The Souls of Black Folk by W.E.B. Du Bois, and this is the first one of his that I have found, and I was really happy to find it. So definitely adding this one to the collection. If I could find some James Baldwin, that would be nice too, because I have, I believe, Giovanni's Room and Go Tell It on the Mountain both on my list that I need to find, and I never see any James Baldwin at these book sales. So maybe at our used bookstore we have in town, I might have a little bit more luck finding something like that, but more than likely I'm going to have to get online and order it. Anyway, another Kurt Vonnegut, Galapagos, which I've heard of, but I don't think it's one of his most popular ones, but this will be, I believe, my fourth Kurt Vonnegut now. And then another Edith Wharton. It is Ethan Frome and Other Stories. So all of that. I've got a total of 16 books plus the Downton Abbey series to add to the collection. So all in all, not a bad haul. It was definitely better than the last one because I think there were only like 9 books that I got at the last library book sale. Normally I end up with like 20 to 25. So not the most I've ever gotten, but pretty good haul nonetheless. So I'm going to take these and put them downstairs on the table, probably put them away tomorrow. And then I have an actual library book checked out that I'm going to start on tonight.